Hey there, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Surviving an FMCSA Audit on Maintenance. Today's topic, we're going to describe the FMCSA rule and carrier responsibilities, what a schedule maintenance program looks like, plus record-keeping requirements, what a periodic inspection is, and a little bit about the qualifications of the inspector, the DVIR process, including record-keeping requirements, and roadside maintenance violations and how to handle that paperwork. I'm Luke Kibbe. I'm going to be your moderator today. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we begin. This webinar is interactive, and your phones have been muted, so please submit your questions in the chat box. I'm going to keep an eye on them throughout the presentation, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end to answer any of the questions. Lastly, you will receive the presentation and link of the recording after the webinar. So keep an eye out on your email tomorrow. Before we begin, I do have a survey question. I was just curious, does your company utilize in-cab telematics data to help with your maintenance schedule and notify your team of upcoming preventive maintenance? I'll just wait just a little bit for that. Yes, no, or I don't have a telematics device or ELD device that's able to do this. Should be interesting to see how Tony might talk a little bit about this, and we'll talk about it at the end as well, about telematics data completing, utilizing your ELD device potentially if it's got the capability of setting up your maintenance program around it, or using your telematics data around with the technology and the data that's coming in from the cab. All right. Thank you guys for doing that. And we'll jump right back in. So with that, I need to double check if Tony's on the line, but we're going to get started. I'm happy to introduce Glowstone's Director of Safety Services and former DOT Inspector, Tony Hugo. Welcome, Tony, and you can take it away.
All right. Sorry about that. So we are, like Luke said, we're going to be talking about surviving an FMCSA audit on maintenance. So, and again, as Luke said, my name is Tony Hugo. I'm the Director of Safety Services here at Glowstone Trucking Solutions. And prior to working for Glowstone, I worked as a safety inspector with the Oregon Department of Transportation, where I conducted roadside inspections on commercial motor vehicles and compliance reviews or safety audits of the motor carriers. And then for today's webinar, we'll be covering what is required by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, or FMCSA, for a motor carrier in relation to maintenance. And it's entitled, again, Surviving an FMCSA Audit on Maintenance. So maintenance issues are some of the most common violations written, and in my opinion, some of the easiest to avoid with a good maintenance program. And during the last DOT roadside inspection blitz that they have annually, last June, 19 out of every 100 trucks inspected were placed out of service for maintenance-related type violations. So a solid maintenance program will go a long way towards eliminating many of the violations and helping to manage your CSA scores. So today we're going to talk about what a solid maintenance program looks like. First, we need to cover what the FMCSA requires of a motor carrier in relation to vehicle maintenance. So Part 396 of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations, or FMCSRs, is titled Inspection, Repair, and Maintenance. And 396.1 states that every motor carrier, its officers, drivers, agents, representatives, and employees, so basically anyone that works for the company and is directly concerned with the inspection or maintenance of a commercial motor vehicle, must be knowledgeable of and comply with the rules of this part. It's pretty much a catch-all phrase that says if you have anything to do with maintenance of the vehicle, whether it's driving, a mechanic, maintaining the records, or any other job that relates to the maintenance, you'll need to know and understand what is required by 396. So the FMCSRs also go on in Part 396.3, entitled Inspection, Repair, and Maintenance, to say that the motor carrier will systematically inspect, repair, and maintain, or cause to systematically inspect, repair, or maintain all motor vehicles or intermodal equipment subject to its control. So all parts and accessories shall be in safe and proper operating condition at all times. And it's up to the motor carrier, no matter how big or how small, to develop an adequate maintenance program. So this means that you'll need to have a maintenance program in place that covers preventative maintenance, random or repair maintenance, the daily vehicle inspection reports or DVIRs, roadside inspections, and annual inspections. So today we're going to cover each one of these in depth and how to stay in compliance with the regulations. So we're going to start off with the preventive maintenance schedule, or PM schedule. And preventive maintenance schedule preventive maintenance actually consists of a schedule servicing inspections and vehicle repairs to prevent potential problems and maximize vehicle availability. So preventive maintenance is used to proactively avoid or reduce vehicle breakdowns, and it's based basically on time. Your company needs to choose how they're going to maintain it. It's going to be either on time, mileage, engine hours, or some people use gallons of fuel used for different parts that they're going to be servicing. And preventive maintenance includes the vehicle inspection, lubrication, adjustments, cleaning, testing, repair or replacing worn out parts. And again, it maximizes vehicle availability. PM services must be performed on a scheduled basis. So again, it's a preventive maintenance schedule. And if the preventive maintenance isn't performed regularly, the vehicle lifespan may be greatly reduced, and you're going to end up with potentially more violations and issues with your vehicles. Some vehicles may be prone to excessive breakdowns, requiring excessive repairs or expensive repairs, and causing the vehicle to be placed out of service when you least expect it, and possibly when you need the vehicle the most. Vehicles may become unsafe due to lack of preventive maintenance, and it's also less expensive to perform the preventative maintenance at regular intervals rather than being placed out of service at, say, a scale for a mechanical defect, or breaking down in the middle of a trip and having to have having a vehicle placed out of service obviously holds up the deliveries and the delays and delays the pickup of loads, and costs the company in loss of time and money to have a truck parked and have a mechanic travel out to the inspection site or wherever your vehicle broke down at to make the repairs. I once had a driver tell me during a roadside inspection that he knew he had a flat tire, but it was at least a 45-minute wait at the truck stop in Troutdale, Oregon. So he left the truck stop without getting the tire repaired, traveled 37 miles down the road to Cascade Locks, the scale where I was working and doing truck inspections, and came across the scale. And you're guaranteed that if a DOT inspector sees an out-of-service violation as you're crossing the scale, you're going to be inspected. So I stopped the truck, inspected the truck, and placed the truck out of service for the flat tire. And instead of having to wait that 45 minutes at the scale, now he ends up waiting 3.5 hours for a mechanic to get to the scale, cost several $100s more for the service call, and then the company had a maintenance out-of-service violation on their record. And while I do understand time and money is the important thing for the driver and possibly the company at the time that this happened, for me it's even more important for a company to minimize violations, especially out-of-service violations. Those come with higher point values for the CSA. So the CSA points from an inspection with a violation will stay on your record for with the company for 2 years and are a tool for the DOT officers to select vehicles for inspections. DOT looks at the company's inspection selection system, or ISS, the vehicle out of service rating, and driver out of service rating. And usually for me, if a company was high in 2 of those 3 scores, I'd do an inspection on that truck. And like it or not, when the DOT inspector finds a truck with some pretty substantial violations, they're going to remember the company and most likely will inspect that truck or another truck from the company the next time they see one until they feel comfortable with the fact that that company is no longer having violations. So being inspected every time your truck crosses a specific scale or travels through a state, because the DOT officers, they communicate with each other, and traveling through that state will become expensive for a company and could result in substantial delays, maybe fines, and your CSA score is going to be affected by it if you continue to get violations. Additionally, if the violations are serious enough and the inspectors continue to find the violations, there's a very good chance the company will be subject to a compliance review. And not to mention, in the inspection I referred to with the driver continuing to drive when he knew he had a flat tire, if he had had an accident that injured or killed another motorist, and it could be proven that the driver or the company was aware that they had the flat tire before they continued to operate the vehicle, the company and the driver would be facing some very serious civil and potentially criminal penalties. And then that leads into another benefit of a proper maintenance program, and that's to help prevent litigation from negligence. If a company can show that their vehicles are maintained at or above DOT requirements, it'll lessen the likelihood that an accident was because of a lack of proper maintenance on the vehicle. But if there is, for some reason, a mechanical failure that results in an accident, and you have not routinely maintained your vehicles, your company's opening themselves up to the possibility of being liable for the incident. For example, if a company has an accident due to a brake failure, the truck may be post-accident inspected. If they can determine that the brakes were not working properly in the post-accident inspection and may have contributed to the accident, then they're going to seek a court order to obtain the vehicle maintenance records. If the operation fails to practice preventive maintenance under these circumstances, you could be prosecuted for a negligent act, which you could have, which you failed to prevent. So to develop a preventive maintenance schedule, one place the company can start would be with the original equipment manufacturer. Look at their recommendations for their scheduled maintenance intervals to determine if their recommendations fit into your normal operations and modify if you need to. The important part here is that you have it documented in some fashion and that you are performing the maintenance in accordance to the schedule. The documentation can be in any form you want. You just need to be able to show the DOT officer in some way what your preventive maintenance schedule is. I've seen preventive maintenance schedules written out on dry erase boards where they have the truck numbers and everything, all the information up on a dry erase board, and it says what they're going to do at the intervals. I've seen it in a 3-ring binder, and we're in a very detailed maintenance policy. Sometimes companies will have a maintenance policy that outlines exactly what they're going to be doing at whatever their intervals that they choose. All of which will meet the FMCSA requirements because, as I said, you just need to have it documented. DOT really doesn't say you have to document it in this way. You just have to be able to show it to them when they are requesting the information, and also be able to show that you're following what you say you're going to do. It's also a best practice to establish pull points or cutoff points as predetermined wear and tear thresholds that, when reached, is the trigger for the part or component to be removed or replaced. One consideration in establishing pull points is time, knowing that certain components only last so long. So you have like tires, brake linings, fuel filters, and clutches are examples of parts and components that can have pull points assigned to them. The idea here is to remove the part or component before it fails or results in a violation during an inspection. So the normal format followed is a program of scheduled PMs. Each preventative maintenance takes place at a scheduled interval and has its own checklist. Here's an example of a typical preventive maintenance program. This is just kind of a generic example of what a company may have in place for their preventative maintenance schedule. I've seen a couple companies use this basic layout. So you have like a preventive maintenance A. Some people call it a safety checklist, and it generally consists of a check of key components such as brakes, tires, fluids, various adjustments, and lubrications. The normal interval for a PMA is roughly 1/2 of the oil change life or oil change interval of the vehicle. So then you'd have the next one would be a PMB, Preventive Maintenance B, which would include all of PMA service items, plus an oil filter changing the oil and the filter, as well as more in-depth checks of the brakes, engine, suspension, and driveline. So just kind of doing a thorough inspection of the vehicle from front to back and changing some of the fluids and stuff. Normal interval for the service B would be on the oil change, if the original manufacturer says whatever the oil change interval would be. And then PMC is generally the last one that most companies have. And then that will include obviously PMA, PMB, and a more extensive inspection of all the components. Scheduled component repair, anything that has pull points or wear points that you'd pull and replace, and a DOT annual inspection. Normally the PMC is scheduled annually, and then you're going to consider that your annual inspection and fill out that annual inspection form. But I've seen some companies that conduct the PM either biannually or quarterly. There's some companies that I've worked with recently that they do a full annual inspection of their vehicle every 3 months. So it goes without saying that sometimes saying that the more times you inspect your vehicles and the amount of experience and training your mechanics have can significantly lower your violations on your vehicles. So recently I was talking with a company, and they were getting several vehicle violations on their roadside inspections, and their vehicle out of service rating was higher than the national average of 20.7%, meaning that 20 times out of 100 vehicles nationally result in an out of service violation in their inspections. So in an effort to be proactive and lower their vehicle out of service rating, they started an inspection lane. So every time a truck or a vehicle returned to their yard from a trip, no matter how short the trip was, if they were just driving across town and coming back, 10 miles or something out and back, that truck went through the inspection lane and was thoroughly inspected. And by implementing this inspection lane, they were able to lower their vehicle maintenance score quite significantly. And the company could see the effects of the inspection lane and inspecting the trucks more frequently. So at one point they felt like they had their their vehicle maintenance under control, and had improved, and we're doing quite well in vehicle maintenance. So they only had the inspection lane open randomly, and really lowered the amount of time that they were inspecting their vehicles. And so then they started to notice that their vehicle out of service rating started to creep back up, and it was consistently increasing, and made it back up to over 12% out of service rating on the safety management system, or SMS. And when I was talking to them a few weeks ago, they had reopened the inspection lane back up full time, and the company has noticed that the out of service rating is starting to go back down. So here's a company that has an impeccable maintenance program. They inspect their vehicles every quarter and have everything, top of the line inspection program. But something as simple as doing a quick inspection of the vehicle every time the vehicle returns to the yard can have a major impact in the company's overall rating. So another key to verifying the system is working is the maintenance records. When FMCSA audits a carrier, as well as verifying the carrier's out of service rate, the FMCSA will also verify that the carrier is maintaining records that prove it has a systematic maintenance program. So the carriers must have information records for each vehicle that includes the fleet number, make and model, or make, model, and year, VIN number, tire size, and owner if it's not owned by the carrier. And of course the maintenance schedule for the unit, a means to indicate when maintenance is to be done. So the regulations also require that all records of maintenance, inspection, maintenance, lubrication, repairs, and upcoming maintenance be kept for 1 year while the unit is in service, and for 6 months after the unit leaves service. So once you sell the truck or take the truck out of operation, you need to maintain those records for another 6 months. And again, the FMCSA doesn't tell you how they must be maintained, only that you must be able to present them upon request. So again, the records can take any form the carrier wants. For example, paper copies, you can store it electronically. Your ELD system may have some way to store that maintenance in the on their dashboard or something, or however you want to maintain them. Just you need to know that you have to be able to present them to the DOT auditor upon request. I've seen some companies, like I say, with a spiral notebook, 3-ring book, and scanned into a maintenance folder on your computer. Like I already said, many ELDs have dashboards that are great for maintaining your maintenance files. There's one item, the annual inspection, though, that must contain specific information detailed in Section 396.17, and the one difference is that you have to maintain that for 14 months. I've always recommended keeping the current annual inspection and the previous one on file at your office, and keep a copy of the current annual inspection in your vehicle at all times. So then this would, by keeping the current and previous one, DOT can only look back for 12 months, and that would cover anything that DOT is going to be looking at. So it also includes power units and trailers, so it's any commercial motor vehicle that you have. You have to maintain those for the time periods. So all this sounds kind of complicated, but as a concerned carrier, and again, no matter how big or how small, you want to make sure that the vehicles are capable of completing their runs without breaking down, or worst case, causing a crash. Breakdowns lead to on-road repairs, which are some of the most expensive ways to maintain or to make repairs and maintenance. It can also lead to irritated customers. And then also you should want to retain records, not just because they're required by the regulations, but because they provide critical information that you can use to decide if your maintenance program is working or where the problems are if it's not working. So that pretty much wraps up the preventive maintenance piece of it. And next we're going to move on to the random or repair maintenance. So this is another really important piece of vehicle maintenance that is required by FMCSA. And random maintenance consists of a register that the motor carrier will record any maintenance that occurs outside of the preventive maintenance schedule. So you're basically going to have two different maintenance records, one for the preventive maintenance and then this one for the random maintenance outside of the preventive maintenance. So if during a trip, if one of your trucks has any maintenance performed on it, it should be noted on the repair or random maintenance register. And the receipt for this repair should also be maintained in some way. So if your truck blows a tire, you replace a headlight, replace or have your brakes adjusted, or any other replacement or repair, anything that's maintenance related should be noted on the random maintenance log and a receipt kept. The record retention is the same as I mentioned earlier with the PM schedule, and you should maintain a separate random maintenance register for each commercial motor vehicle. It's the easiest way. Again, DOT doesn't say that you have to do it that way, but it's probably the easiest way to do it is just keep one separate log for each, one separate random maintenance register for each vehicle. Then there's a few other items that kind of relate to random maintenance that should be recorded on the random register, and that's for the DVIRs and roadside inspections. So the first thing we're going to talk about here is the DVIR process, or daily vehicle inspection reports, and they've changed a little bit over the last few years. The FMCSA changed the requirements of DVIRs a few years ago. In Part 396.11, on the second paragraph, it starts off with the driver of a passenger carrying CMV, subject to this regulation, must prepare and submit a report even if no defect or deficiency is discovered by or reported to the driver. And that's the way it used to be for all commercial motor vehicles. But the part that's recently changed is specific for property carrying companies. And it states that the driver of all other, meaning other than passenger carriers, So of all other commercial motor vehicles are not required to prepare or submit a report if no defect or deficiency is discovered by or reported to the driver. So although I do feel that it's best practice to complete a DVIR every day, the FMCSA says that it's not required. And what is required is that if a safety-related deficiency or defect is discovered, that should be noted on the and documented on the DVIR. The defect should be corrected before the vehicle is operated again, and there should be an entry in the random repair register in relation to the defect, and the receipt for the parts or service or repair should also be kept in that file. So during an audit, the DOT will be reviewing the DVIRs. If there's a safety-related defect noted on a report, then they're going to check to make sure that the defect was repaired. They'll be checking the random repair register for maintenance, for any entry and receipt in relation to the defect on the DVIRs. The one thing you don't want to have is a repeated safety defect noted over several days. If once it's noted on there, you need to have it fixed. And then you don't want to continue to put that truck into operation if the defect is noted. If DOT can prove operation of the vehicle with safety defects noted not being repaired, the company will receive a violation during an audit. So if there's a gap of any significant time frame from the date of the notation to the defects, date of notation of the defects and the actual repairs, the DOT officer will look for the operation of the vehicle with safety-related defects. So the next piece is the roadside inspections. The process is very much the same as a DVIR. It's just somebody else is saying that there's a defect in that, and that being the DOT officer. So there's two basic differences in the types of violations that you need to be aware of in relation to the vehicle maintenance. Out-of-service violations and non-out-of-service violations are the two basic differences. The DOT officer should go over the report with the driver and inform them about what the violations are and what needs to be done to take care of the violations noted on the report. For the out-of-service violations, some people refer to these as red tag violations. Whatever caused the violation will need to be corrected at the inspection site and before the vehicle is placed back into service. One quick note on that I would see every so often. If your driver has, or if the driver has a out-of-service violation on the trailer, some drivers would be a little bit confused on this during an inspection. If there's an out-of-service violation on the trailer can be dropped and the truck is still available for that driver to maybe drive to a store, pick up parts that needed for repairs, and can use that. So you can still operate the truck. It's the trailer that's placed out of service. If there's out-of-service violations on the truck, then obviously you can't operate the truck. So whatever caused the violations will need to be corrected at the inspection site and before the vehicle is placed back into service. Additionally, the inspection report will need to be signed by the mechanic that performed the repairs. If it's something simple or that your driver can fix his or herself, the driver can sign the mechanic's line and continue on. Just put sign their name on the mechanic's line and for title, driver, and then date it, and they're releasing that. Either the driver or the mechanic is releasing that, saying that yes, the out-of-service repairs have been fixed and it's no longer in violation, and you can operate the vehicle after that point. Just do not allow your drivers to drive, or if you're the driver, don't drive a commercial motor vehicle that is under an out-of-service order. And then for the non-out-of-service violations, the DOT officer should explain the process for any non-out-of-service violations. For these violations, the driver or carrier will need to repair the defects before the next dispatch. So if the driver has already been dispatched, say leaving the Portland, Oregon area to travel to Idaho or something, they've already been dispatched there. Once they arrive to that location, if they're redispatched to another location, those repairs are going to need to be made before they leave that location to the next location. So you want to make sure that make the repairs as soon as you can, but the driver's okay to operate the vehicle until the next dispatch or 15 days after the inspection, whatever's the shortest time. When you have an inspection with violations, either out of service or not, the driver should provide a copy of the inspection report to the motor carrier as soon as possible. And the motor carrier will need to return a copy of the inspection report to the agency that conducted the inspection within 15 days with this section that states all defects have been corrected, signed by a supervisor. So pay attention, make sure your drivers pay attention to what the DOT officer says about returning a copy to the DOT. Some agencies want a copy of the inspection report returned whether there are violations or not. In Oregon, they only require an inspection report returned to them when there's violations. If there's no violations, there's no reason to return the inspection report to the DOT in Oregon. But a copy of all inspection reports are required to be kept in your maintenance file for at least 12 months from the date of inspection. And again, FMCSA doesn't tell you how you must maintain your files. They just want you to be able to provide the information to the auditor when it's requested. So it's kind of whatever works best for you on how you're going to file that. And then the last part of a maintenance file that we're going to talk about today is going to be the periodic or annual inspections. The DOT inspection is required, the annual DOT inspection is required of all commercial motor vehicles that have a GVIR of 10,001 pounds or more, as defined in the definition of commercial motor vehicle in 390.5. That's where you find most of the definitions for the FMCSRs. And this includes all power units or trailers operating under the motor carrier's DOT number. So with regards to a compliance review, the DOT is going to be looking for a gap between the previous and current annual inspections. So you'll want to make sure that you complete an annual inspection within 365 days of the previous annual inspection. So if DOT can prove the vehicle was being operated while the vehicle did not have a current annual inspection, they're going to write a violation during a compliance review. And this could come with pretty substantial fines and will definitely affect your overall rating in the compliance review. Copies of the annual inspections, like I said before, should be kept in both the vehicle maintenance file at the office and the truck. DOT will check for the copy of the in the truck during a roadside inspection and could possibly write a violation for not having a copy of an annual inspection in the vehicle at the time of an inspection. So this includes one for the truck, and if you're hauling any trailers, one for any or all the trailers that you're pulling. Each annual inspection will need to be maintained for review in the maintenance file for a period of 14 months. And again, I generally suggest that a copy be maintained. A company maintain the current and previous document for all expirable items like annual inspections. So this will cover the extent of what DOT can look for during a compliance review if they can only look back 12 months or to the previous audit, whichever is the shortest time. One of the things related to an annual inspection that I get a lot of questions or calls about is how someone can qualify to conduct their own annual inspections or have your mechanic for a company conduct annual inspections for your company. So the FMCSA defines an inspector in 396.17 as a person who understands the inspection criteria set forth in 49 CFR, Part 393, and Appendix G of this subchapter, and can identify defective components. So the person is knowledgeable of and has mastered the methods, procedures, tools, and equipment used when performing an inspection, and is also capable of performing an inspection by reason of experience and training. So then in 396.19 is where you'll find inspector qualifications. And then these qualifications outline how a mechanic or someone that is going to conduct annual inspections on commercial motor vehicles can qualify. And quickly to summarize the qualifications, it says a motor carrier must ensure that individuals performing annual inspections are qualified and can identify defective components, are knowledgeable of and have mastered, again, the methods, procedures, tools, and equipment used when performing an inspection, and are capable of performing an inspection by reason of experience, training, or both. It goes on to say that there's 4 ways you can qualify. The first way you can qualify by experience and or training is by successfully completing a federal or state-sponsored training program or have a certificate for a state or Canadian province that qualifies the individual to perform commercial motor vehicle inspections. The second is by having a combination of training or experience totaling at least 1 year. This training may consist of participating in a commercial motor vehicle manufacturer-sponsored training program or similar commercial training program designed to train students in commercial motor vehicle operation and maintenance, or experience as a mechanic or inspector in a motor carrier or intermodal equipment maintenance program. And then the third is experience as a mechanic or inspector in a commercial motor vehicle maintenance program at a commercial garage, fleet leasing company, or similar facility. And then the fourth way is to have experience as a commercial motor vehicle inspector for a state, provincial, or a federal government, so basically a DOT certified inspector. So for all those, it pretty much is if you've got a year of experience as a mechanic and understand what they are looking at in an annual inspection and how to identify parts that are worn or not in compliance with the DOT FMCSRs, then you're going to be qualified for an inspector. Just need to, there's a form online. You can print that out and keep that in your file. So if motor carriers are employing someone to conduct annual inspections, you must retain evidence of the individual's qualifications under this section. You must retain the evidence for the period during which the individual is performing annual motor vehicle inspections for the motor carrier for the entire time that they're employed by you and for a year thereafter. And then the form, again, can be found online by searching FMCSA Annual Inspector Qualifications form. And if you're employing your own annual inspectors or your mechanics are performing the annual inspections on your vehicles, you should have this form in their file for that time period. So that pretty much covers vehicle maintenance for an audit. If you're operating commercial motor vehicles on highway, these are the basics of what you need to maintain and track to stay in compliance. Just remember that there's the 5 basic components of vehicle maintenance: the preventive maintenance, random maintenance, DVIRs, roadside inspections, and annual inspections. Your vehicle maintenance is only as good as your documentation. So if you don't have it documented, if you don't have documentation at all or it's not documented properly, it will be basically the equivalent of not having a maintenance program and result in having violations in vehicle maintenance. These violations can affect the company's overall safety rating, cause substantial violations, and cost the company time and money in extensive repairs and parked vehicles. So again, that pretty much wraps it up. Thank you all very much for listening, and I'm going to turn it back to Luke for the questions and to wrap up the webinar. Thank you very much, Luke.
All right. Well, this is a perfect time to transition to that Q&A time. So again, thank you, Tony, for all that information. There's actually a lot of great information in there. I did have one question. As you guys, if you want to take some time, write some questions down so we can see them. I did have one question for you, Tony. I was curious about what or how can a telematics device or ELD, I know we like to use Geotab. What kind of information is it tracking that can be used for maintenance?
So my experience working with some of the ELDs and different programs out there is a lot of times it can track your, obviously you can decide how you want to set your maintenance program up. If you're going to do it on mileage, it can track your mileage and cue you to know when certain parts are going to be wearing out or get to that wear point and need to be pulled. You can also, many of the programs have the ability to scan in your receipts and store them right there. It's a very quick and clean way to keep your records in order. You click on the date that you did a maintenance, perform some sort of maintenance, either preventative or random maintenance, and it'll bring up that receipt and invoice and you can make notes on what you repaired and what you fixed at that time. So it's a great tool for tracking your maintenance program and also just keeping everything organized and in place for your maintenance program.
Awesome. And I know I've done a lot of research sort of seeing what the future is with these telematics devices, and you can sort of look at Europe as a sort of an example where they're already starting to use these devices to not only warn you of when something could be coming up or just before something happens, but automatically sending in an order, say through Amazon or wherever you're getting your parts from, to send it to your location before the truck even gets to that location, so the maintenance can be done right then and there, and there's no downtime. And that's sort of the future of what these devices could potentially do. So pretty interesting as we look at that over the years. I don't see any other questions, so I'll wait just one more second. But again, I just definitely want to thank Tony for going over all of this. It was interesting, definitely hearing the inspector side of things, and what you've seen out there as an inspector. But with that, we're going to wrap up. But before we do, I did want to cover a couple of things. Goldstone does a lot of DOT corrective action plans. So if you've been in an audit, especially roadside audit, and they found a violation, you can contact us and let us look at the information, let us create a corrective action plan for you and help you with that process. It can potentially save companies quite a bit of money if there's substantial violations on record there. So that's one service that we offer. And as I mentioned, we are an authorized reseller of Geotab and their telematics device. And it can do so much. There's so much customization that you can do, not just for the basics of like a ELD, but a complete package of gathering that information for you. And the big thing with Glowstone, when we work with Geotab, is we like to manage the ELD data for you. So we can make that data work for your company. And so if you want to check more on that, you can go to glowstone.com/Geotab. And as I don't know if I might have sent you guys emails on it, but I've written probably 16 articles on ELDs over the last couple of years. We have a couple other webinars and a couple ebooks on ELD devices and the rules and regulations around it and what to do when putting it in your truck. If you want that information, you can shoot me an email. Like I said, we're going to have this recording available to you. Hopefully tomorrow I'll get that to you, and so you can just reply to that email. But with that, I do just thank you for your guys' time for joining us for this webinar, and I'll go ahead and close it. Hopefully we'll see you next time. Thank you.